If you like Rob Halford, or if you're interested in the history, the music, or just the idea of heavy metal, I think you're really going to like what I have for you today. So what I found is it's so interesting. It's actually a book review for a book about heavy metal. And I went and tried to find this thing to see if it actually still exists, and I did. It's out of print, it looks like. I found it on Amazon. It's a book called Heavy Metal Thunder: The Music, Its History, Its Heroes. And this was printed, it looks like, in 1985. Well, anyway, apparently this book, Rob Halford wrote the introduction to the book. So in this newspaper, I'll show you here, it was printed in Wichita Falls. They did a review on this book, and what they specifically did was pull out the things that Rob Halford talked about in the introduction that talks about what heavy metal is all about. And again, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you're going to love listening to this little article that largely talks to or listens to the things that Rob Halford has to say. Anyway, I think you'll like this. So the title is called Hendrix to Van Halen. The newspaper is the Times Record News, and it was in November 15th, 1985. Hendrix to Van Halen. Okay. So here we go into the article. Heavy metal traces its roots to 60s rock. And then it tells you what the name of the book is. Heavy Metal Thunder: The Music, Its History, blah, 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 by Philip Bash, or Bashy, or whatever, however you'd say that. And the book was $12.95. Okay, here's the article. Teenagers love it and adults fear it. Heavy metal is a musical term bandied about a lot these days, but who knows what it means? Heavy Metal Thunder is a gaudy book that traces the history of heavy metal, not only its music, but also of its heroes, whom young people have gone gaga over. A foreword by Rob Halford, leather-clad vocalist of Judas Priest, describes what heavy metal means in language that the youngest fan and oldest critic can easily understand. Okay, now listen to this. First, heavy metal means power. This is Rob Halford. It's controlled aggression. It's a unification of the artist and audience into one. Its most important element is the bond that exists between the musician and the fan. At a heavy metal concert, the entire arena becomes a stage. No barrier separates what's happening on the stage from what's happening in the audience. It's total involvement for everyone, Halford said. Okay, the first thing is, what do you think of that definition from Halford, and do you agree with it? And do you have any experience with that idea yourself? Anyway, please put that in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. Okay, next. Halford says heavy metal has been around for a long time. Its roots go back to the late 60s and early 70s. He says heavy metal speaks especially to 15 and 16-year-olds who feel that their parents do not understand them and consequently spend a lot of time slamming doors and stalking out of the house. Again, this is Rob Halford writing this. This is his interpretation of it. And I'm actually really curious right now, because I knew a lot of people when I was a young guy that were into heavy metal, and that was kind of a thing that you'd see in those families sometimes. And I don't know, back in the day, and you'll probably remember this, a lot of people blamed that kind of thing on the music. But of course, was that really what was causing the problem? Anyway, love your feedback on this. A heavy metal concert acts as a catharsis for the frustration of teenagers. I personally can kind of relate to that. I remember there were certain albums, certain bands, that aggressive music that I'd kind of go hide myself in my bedroom and just turn that music up. And there really was something about that it kind of, it was a cathartic. There was a little bit of a release, or this feeling of energy or something that it brought out that was really important. Okay. Contrary to opinions of the moral majority, I remember this, who claim, quote, this music sets out to bend young people's minds and to inspire violence, disruption, and even Satanism. unquote. When a show ends, and it continues the quote, fans are physically and mentally drained. They're not going to start, that's the end of the quote. They're not going to start smashing windows or people, Halford says. Judas Priest members are referred to as the grandfathers of heavy metal. The group's title juxtaposes a type of clergyman and the name of Christ's betrayer, which suggests a redeeming yet forbidden presence. Members grew up in Britain's working class, and their poverty instilled in them a determination to succeed in music. Halford's presence in, by the way, it's interesting that it calls them grandfathers of heavy metal. And do you find that true? I think that's probably true when you start talking about Judas Priest, because they do go back quite a ways. I mean, we did a video recently where we talked about Sad Wings of Destiny, and that was at 1976. So that was almost a decade before this was written. And they did influence. I mean, you look at that album specifically, Sad Wings of Destiny, and that I think inspired a lot of people like me early on that were really into that type of music. So anyway, I'd love to hear your feedback on that as well. Okay, let's see. Halford's presence in black leather, silver studs, motorcycle cap, and black riding crop set the stylized image that has stuck with the group since their first United States tour in 1977. Yeah, and they weren't always like that. You look at on the back of, Sad Wings of Destiny. They do not have that look at that stage in their career. Its stage shows are extravaganzas that few hard rock musicians can surpass. And unlike other musicians who discard their weird, wild dress after the show is over, members of Priest dress the same offstage as on. Yet still, unlike other musicians, Motley Crue and Van Halen, Priest members resist offstage excesses. Halford says after a performance, he usually goes straight to the showers. He says he loses as much as 10 pounds each time he performs on stage. Van Halen perhaps inspires more hero worship than any other group. Lead singer David Lee Roth is considered rock's premier showman. Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing, though, is what most critics focus on. He is billed as, quote, the most technically advanced and original player since Jimi Hendrix, unquote. His trademarks are frequent use of a harmonica. Now, this is... it's so interesting listening to people that write these articles because of the unbelievable kind of cluelessness of what they have to write. Because there's no doubt that when the person wrote this article, and maybe it was an editor that went and did this, the word that was certainly used when they were doing the research for this with Eddie Van Halen was harmonics. But somebody said that must be incorrect and then changed it to use of a harmonica. So what it was supposed to say, I am certain, was his trademarks, referring again to Eddie Van Halen, are the frequent use of harmonics, where it says a harmonica, distortion, and his famous two hands on the neck style. Harmonics, by the way, is if you're not a guitar player and you don't know, it's a way of touching the string without pushing it all the way down. And there's certain places on a guitar. I'll do a video that shows you harmonics another time on one of our guitars. But you literally touch a string at certain intervals in the length of a string. You touch it lightly, play it, and the note will resonate. And Eddie Van Halen did this, as it says here, all the time. It was a very important part of his playing. Okay. So many guitarists tried to copy Van Halen's style. He sometimes plays with his back to the audience so his rivals can't see what he does. I don't know. Is that true? Has anybody ever heard that be said? I don't want anybody to see how I'm doing this. I don't think that's accurate. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. From the 70s through 1984, Van Halen has steadily grown to be the most representative of what heavy metal means, a total meshing of performers and audience. If that's going to be your definition of heavy metal, I suppose, then I guess. Okay. Striking pictures add a kind of garish glamour to this one-of-a-kind book. Okay, getting back to the fact that this is a book. Resumes of most heavy metal groups are included and would be of value to those who either play music or just listen and get involved. If you ever heard of this book or read this book, I'd love to hear about it. And so please leave that in the comments. Or if you have another idea or another book of some sort that covers this same topic that you know of, that'd be good. I'd love to hear about that too. I actually read a lot of these things just because I'm so fascinated in the topic. And so, of course, as always, please follow the channel, like the video. There's so many things you could comment on from an article like this. I'd love to get your feedback on just anything that was said in here. So please leave those in the comments. And with that, as always, have yourself a fantastic day.